So we are watching now for over a month a blockade that has continuously held off supplies, food, and resources to Nagorno-Karabakh. This is a region you have been to, I believe, 90 times. You have been there many times before. When you look at what has happened in the past, there have been lots of tensions and issues, obviously, over this land. And when you look at what is happening now, what most concerns you about the current blockade?
Well, I'm afraid it's a continuity of aggression by Azerbaijan against the Armenians. The little land of Nagorno-Karabakh was relocated by Stalin inside Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan's been trying to carry out ethnic cleansing of the Armenians from there for a long time. Way back in the early 1990s, I was there when Azerbaijan unleashed a war against the Armenians. I used to count 400 Grad missiles a day being pounded in on the little capital, Stepanakert, by Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan used cluster bombs, which is against international law. It was a war in which hundreds were killed. The Armenians hung in there then, but the aggression has continued. And then in September 2020, Azerbaijan unleashed another war. And they were more successful. They were very well armed, had the resources. They managed to capture a significant amount of Karabakh, and it now is under Azerbaijan control. And I'm sorry to say they've already destroyed at least one church, but we'll come back to that issue of the destruction of holy places. And there are many prisoners, and Azerbaijan and Armenia signed a ceasefire, peace agreement, and it was agreed that both sides would release prisoners. Armenia released all the prisoners from Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan has not released all the prisoners from Armenia and has captured some more since. So please, they do need prayers because they're in a terrible situation. So that war, the Armenians lost control of quite a lot of Nagorno-Karabakh, and as I say, many people were killed. And then in December the 12th, they began another form of aggression, and that is they blocked what's called the Lachin Corridor, which is the only road connecting Armenia with the little land, what remains of it in Nagorno-Karabakh. And that road is used for the transfer of essential foodstuffs, medicines, and also for people to be able to go back and forth. And with the blockage of that, the situation is now very, very serious. Indeed, it has been said by people it may indeed be an impending genocide because the shortage of food is now getting desperate. The shortage of medicines is very, very serious, especially medicines like insulin for people with diabetes. And the transfer of patients from Karabakh into Armenia needing urgent medical treatment, that has been very, very much stymied. One has already died. So it is a very dire situation indeed.
We've heard reports of vegetable stores not having any vegetables. We spoke with one mother whose daughter was supposed to be traveling outside for cancer treatment and was unable to do that until recently. And you start to think through, if the only road is blocked in and out, that seems to be a very pervasive form of aggression, and not just aggression, but it's a very deadly act, as you were just saying. Russia has supposedly, they've been the peacekeepers here. They were supposed to stop this from happening. What do you make of that situation in light of everything else that's going on right now with Russia, their inability to ensure that Azerbaijan didn't block this corridor?
Well, it's a very serious situation because Russian peacekeepers are meant to be keeping the peace and keeping sort of justice, and they are obviously failing on this issue of the Lachin Corridor with desperate results, which I've already hinted at. There are lots more. There are a lot of examples, heartbreaking examples of the suffering. There's a story I've just unloaded now, it's just come through, of a young mother, and she's 48, and she has a husband and two twins. Her husband is a soldier, he's been on the front line, not able to come home. Her twins are 5 years old, a boy and a girl. The daughter has lower limb weakness and hemoglobin problems. They attend the Children's Health Centre, which is attached to a rehabilitation centre, which they very graciously called after me, but I didn't call it that. But she says, and this is her, I've been working there for more than 20 years as a senior nurse. During this blockade, it's become indescribably difficult for me to live and take care of my children. Due to the restriction on diesel fuel, my private car is parked, I can't use it, so I have to reach work and take my children to kindergarten and return home every day, with my children crying on foot through the frost, through the ice, on the snow. And that becomes doubly difficult when your husband is not at your side and your child has problems with walking. I do this every day. And when your child asks you for fruit, vegetables, sweets, you can't respond. You can't do that. And all this is not the end of my troubles. Power outrages, the lack of food and household supplies remind you every minute you're deprived of the normal conditions that every human being needs to live. And that's just one story. I could give you many, many like that. But it summarizes the desperate situation, the lack of food, the lack of fuel, the cold. Oh, people may well die from hypothermia very soon. And the just desperation that they're in, and it's getting worse every day. There's one poignant, slight, what I say, easing of the food restrictions, but it's a terrible one. There is meat available, but the meat is available because Azerbaijan has stopped the supply to the farmers. It's a very farming community of food for the cattle. So the cattle are dying. So they have to kill the cattle. So that's why meat is available. But of course, what a terrible way to have to kill your livestock.
What do you make of? I mean, I have seen, and I'm sure you've seen this too, throughout social media, other places, these claims that, that the corridor is not being blocked, that the road in and out is not being blocked, that this is all being conjured up and made up, which very clearly that's not the case. We know there's a humanitarian crisis there. When you look at that misinformation, and then you look at this long history, and I know it's a complicated history, but what is it that Azerbaijan wants to gain, in your view, in this current conflict by doing this?
I think President Aliyev of Azerbaijan has said they want to get all the Armenians out of this land. And it is ethnic cleansing, or it was ethnic genocide. And they've been quite clear about that. And again, the suffering of the people is so poignant. Families haven't been able to reunite. There was a lot of children who were in Armenia itself. Many of them had been taking part in an international music concert. And then they got stuck in Armenia when the blockade happened. And they've not been able to get through, be with their parents. I mean, many, I think probably getting on for well over 100, maybe more, have been just separated, stuck in Armenia, unable to be with their families. And then I had a message this morning that the Azerbaijan authorities had allowed about 50 children to go through in a bus. That as they were going through, they were brutally, not physically attacked, but emotionally attacked. Azeris got on the bus, took photos in their faces, threatened them, were brutal to them, and one of the children fainted, and they've had a terrible time getting through. So the whole situation is one actually of cruelty, of suffering, and I would actually use the word evil, because to inflict such suffering gratuitously is, in my view, evil.
Well, and when you look at this dispute, I think just to help people understand it, because you know this so well, you're talking about, for a lot of people, they look at this and they see, okay, it's a land dispute. Armenia and Azerbaijan are arguing over this land, and they're having this land dispute. But when you look at the population, the vast majority of the people living there in Nagorno-Karabakh are Christians. They're Armenian Christians, right? So you have this other element. I don't know if you could speak to that at all and help people maybe delineate between and understand what exactly is the core of that conflict.
Well, certainly, the Armenians were the first nation in the world to become Christian, as long ago in 301. And there's some of the oldest churches in the world in that little land of Karabakh. And just one thing, it's an additional fear about the situation, is that there is a part of ancient Armenia that Stalin gave to Azerbaijan. It's called Nakhchivan. It's quite large. I was actually there at the end when Azerbaijan was driving out the Armenians who were living there, and they were bombing and shelling them. And then they destroyed every single Christian structure that was in Nakhchivan. Beautiful cathedral, churches, the ancient 100 years old stone crosses. And they weren't just attacked, they were obliterated. If you fly over Nakhichevan now, you cannot see there's any sign of Christian buildings, Christian living in Nakhichevan. And one of the fears is that that's going to happen to Nagorno-Karabakh, that if they drive all the Armenians out, they've already destroyed one church at least, that there'll be another Nakhichevan and destruction of some of the most holy Christian places in the world, some of the oldest and most beautiful. And so that is a real worry. And the annihilation of Christians is very much part of the agenda of getting rid of the Christians. And that's one of the things that the Armenians are really worried about, because they will lose part of their unique Christian heritage.
You know, you are doing a lot of work in this area to raise awareness. A lot of people are hearing about this for the first time, or they're seeing details on this. What are some things that can practically be done at this point to try and stop this blockade?
Well, there has to be a lot of pressure put on Azerbaijan. Obviously, it's not going to do it voluntarily. I asked an oral question in the House of Lords, or in the House of the British Parliament yesterday, on this whole issue. And the things that need to be done is, I think, the UN Security Council should be putting a lot of pressure on Azerbaijan, or there should be sanctions on Azerbaijan by the international community. There needs to be enough pressure on Azerbaijan to actually open that corridor, because the longer it stays, the more people will suffer and they'll be dying, and it will be genocide. And that is the big fear. And to say they've already carried out historically genocide or destruction of course, there was the famous or infamous Armenian genocide of 1915, when Turkey, very, very close allies with Azerbaijan. The Azerbaijanis sometimes call themselves Azeri Turks. I mean, they're that close. And of course, they then slaughtered 1.5 million Armenians and grabbed all of Western Armenia, which is now Eastern Turkey. And very poignantly, it includes Mount Ararat, which is Armenia's national symbol. So you see it when you're in Armenia, and it's trapped behind Turkish borders, which is very, very poignant. So there is a very disturbing history of genocide, and it is just feared that this is going to be part of that history. And for the time being, the international community is just letting it go on. And we need to put a lot of pressure on the international community to call Azerbaijan to account. We have an obligation under the Genocide Convention to prevent genocide. And as I said in the House of Lords yesterday, I don't think the British government is fulfilling that responsibility. And this is something which I think as Christians we really need to pray for, because this could be another stage of genocide, destruction of Christian people, destruction of Christian heritage, and we need to pray.
Well, and prayer is a powerful tool. Obviously, there's the on the ground pressure, and then there's prayer. And I think any believer around the world can dive into prayer on this, and should. This is a major, major issue. And you look at countries like the UK, you look at America, and you wonder, where is the intense pressure? It needs to happen in order for this to be remedied. But when I think about responsibility, I do want to pivot a little bit to your story, because a number of things in reading about you and learning the work that you do and that you've done over the past few decades, you have risked your life, your safety. You have gone to some of the most dangerous places in the world. A lot of people in politics, they show up to vote, to debate, but they don't necessarily show up to the places that they are speaking about or debating over. And you have done that, delivered aid. You have sought to be a voice for the voiceless, just like you are today. What is it for you that has driven that ongoing quest?
Well, it's a huge privilege, isn't it? We've got freedom, we've got democracy, we've got food, we've got electricity and warmth, we've got all the good things of this life. And I believe we do have a Christian responsibility to care for the persecuted. And one of the things that I always feel so humbled by is when we do go into the dangerous places, we do go where people are being killed, where the genocides are happening. It's happening also in Nigeria. 7,000 Christians have been killed in the last 18 months, etc., etc. But we come across people of such faith and such love. And I'll never forget Archbishop Pakif Martirosyan, who was the Archbishop in Karabakh during the war in the 1990s. And I was in Stepanakert, the capital, on the day his house got a direct hit. And he's a man whose life actually was saved by prayer, because in the war in Karabakh it's mighty cold. I mean, it's really cold, and there was no electricity, so bitterly, bitterly cold. But he would always get up every morning at very, very promptly to pray early, and he'd get up to pray. And on that day, his life was saved by prayer, because 1 minute after he got up to pray, his house got a direct hit, and a huge bomb landed on the bed where he would have been lying if he hadn't got up to pray. But I went to visit him, and the house was still smouldering with the bomb damage, and he was standing there in the middle of his smouldering house. And I'll never forget his words. He said, and I could give you a longer quotation, but the end of his quotation I shall never forget. He said, we have a God of love, and whatever evil forces are unleashed against us in this country or anywhere in the world, we must never hate. We must always love. We must always love. And that's the message we get, and it's so humbling. But what a privilege to be alongside people like that. And it does make a difference to be there. They do say the fact they know they're not forgotten does help them to survive when they feel so under threat. But it's our privilege to be there. And we are blessed by being there. So I would just not take any credit for it. I'd say it's a privilege to be there.
And I love everything you just said, because, you know, the fact that you're on the ground, that you're there, it also brings a credibility to it that you have actually seen these things and these people who are going through these very difficult times. Just as we round out to a close, what can you tell us about the people of Nagorno-Karabakh? You've been there again dozens of times, 90 times, I believe. What can you tell us about them?
Well, they are a deeply Christian people. As I say, you've got some of the oldest Christian churches, monuments, they call them stone crosses, in the world there. But they have a wonderful Christian spirit. And that is what's such an inspiration. They have a living faith, and that faith comes through in their actions, in the love in action. It's not just emotional love, it's not just prayer, it's prayer into deeds and love in action. And the way they support each other, the way that they respond to the horrors that are being unleashed upon them. You don't find hate. And as the Archbishop said, whatever evil forces are unleashed against us, we must never hate. We have a God of love. We must never hate. We must always love. And that comes through when you meet the people of Karabakh. They are predominantly a rural people. I mean, there are businesses there and there are vineyards and very nice wine, I might say. But they have predominantly a rural landscape, and they are therefore farmers, but people in the capital, Stepanakert, they also do have a lot of things that go on in cities. But they do so with dignity, with great competence, professionalism, and again, love. That, I think, is the word that comes through again and again.
And that's an amazing place for us to stop, that word love. You have seen a lot in the work you've done, and that ability to remember who God is and what he calls us to is so important. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for letting me share the pain and the passion and the request for prayer. It's a great privilege, and I find it a blessing to be with you. So thank you.